They found Marcus Reeves 3 miles from Camp Steinwald at dawn on February 23, 1943, face down in the snow wearing what appeared to be a dead bear. The Austrian forest was silent except for his ragged breathing. Behind him, stretching back through the pine trees like a river of ghosts, 800 pairs of footprints led into the darkness. Footprints of men, women, and children who should have been dead by sunrise, who should have been lying in a mass grave before the breakfast bell rang at the German camp. But Marcus Reeves had done something no general thought possible. He had walked into a maximum security Nazi prison camp, past the guard towers, past the searchlights, past the German shepherds trained to tear a man's throat out, and he had walked out with every single prisoner. 800 souls. Not one bullet fired, not one drop of American blood spilled. How does a 28-year-old private from Montana do what 50 trained commandos could not? How does one man succeed where an entire assault battalion was guaranteed to fail? The answer lies in the stupidest idea anyone had ever heard. An idea so ridiculous that when Marcus first proposed it in a briefing room full of officers, they laughed him right out of the meeting. They told him to shut his mouth and shine his boots. They said real soldiers solve problems with bullets, not costumes. But those officers did not grow up in the wilderness like Marcus did. They did not spend their childhood tracking grizzly bears through Glacier National Park. They did not know what Marcus's father had taught him when he was just 8 years old, watching a black bear walk through their campsite without making a sound. Bears are ghosts, son, his father had whispered that morning, both of them frozen behind a pine tree. They can move through a place, and you will not even know they were there until you see the paw prints at dawn. Remember that. Sometimes the best way to move is to become something people expect to see. 20 years later, Marcus would remember those words, and 800 people would live because he did. This is the true story of the greatest rescue mission in World War II that the military tried to bury. A mission so unorthodox, so impossibly bold, that it took 35 years before the survivors could finally track down the man who saved them. Before you finish listening to this, you will understand why sometimes the craziest idea is the only one worth trying. But first, we need to go back. Back to a cold morning in northern Italy, January 15, 1943, where Marcus Reeves sat in a wooden chair in a briefing room about to hear something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The briefing room smelled like cigarette smoke and wet wool. 40 soldiers sat on hard benches, their breath fogging in the unheated space. Outside, Italian winter rain hammered against the windows of the forward operating base. General William Hartwick stood at the front, a man with steel-gray hair and 3 rows of medals that caught the dim light. He was career military West Point class of 1918, a man who had seen the last war and knew this one was not going to end clean. He pulled down a map. Central Austria, a valley in the Alps where the snow never completely melted even in summer. Gentleman, Hartwick's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. This is Camp Steinwald. The name meant nothing to Marcus, just another German facility in another occupied territory. But then Hartwick pinned up photographs and the room went silent. Skeletal faces stared from behind barbed wire. Men who had been starved down to their bones. Women holding children who looked like ancient, wizened things with huge eyes. Not soldiers, civilians. Jewish families who had been rounded up from Vienna, Prague, Budapest. Intelligence confirms 800 prisoners, Hartwick continued. His pointer tapped the photos. Scheduled for execution March 1st. That is 45 days from today. Marcus felt his breakfast turn to lead in his stomach. He had seen photographs like this before. The army showed them during training to remind soldiers what they were fighting for. But seeing new ones, knowing these people were alive right now, waiting. We are going in, Hartwick said. The pointer moved to the map tracing a route. 50-man assault team. We hit them at dawn. Blow the fence with C4 provide covering fire extract as many as we can. Captain Morrison, a square-jawed infantry officer, raised his hand. Expected casualties, Sir Hartwick's jaw tightened. 12 to 15 of ours, 4 to 500 of theirs. The number sat in the room like a stone. 4 to 500 dead prisoners, over half. The Germans have standing orders, Hartwick explained. If we attack, they execute the prisoners before retreating. We have seen it at 3 other camps. We hit hard, we hit fast, but we are trading lives. Best case scenario, we save 300, maybe 400 people. Marcus's hand went up before he could think about it. Hartwick's eyes found him. Private Reeves, you have something to add. The other soldiers turned to look. Marcus suddenly felt very young, very aware that he was the lowest-ranked man in the room. A supply clerk, a nobody who had been invited to this briefing by accident because he had been delivering ammunition when it started. "Sir, I was just thinking," Marcus's voice came out rougher than he intended. "What if we did not fight our way in at all?" Silence. Then a ripple of confused laughter. "Excuse me?" Hartwick's expression was unreadable. Marcus stood up. His legs felt shaky, but he kept going. "The camp backs up to forest, right? What if there is a way to get in quiet? No explosions, no firefight. Just slip past the guards and what Private Hartwick's voice had an edge now. Ask them nicely to unlock the gates." More laughter, louder this time. Captain Morrison was grinning. "Maybe we could send them a Christmas card," Private Reeves Hartwick said, and his voice had gone cold. "Your job in this man's army is to carry ammunition, count supplies, and keep your mouth shut. We have trained strategists for tactical planning. We have officers who have spent 20 years learning how to win battles. What we do not need is a supply clerk from Montana telling us how to run a military operation." The room erupted. Soldiers slapped their knees. Someone made a joke Marcus did not catch over the noise. His face burned hot. "You are dismissed," Private Hartwick said. "Report to Lieutenant Colonel Brennan. You are on permanent supply duty until further notice. Maybe counting bullets will teach you where you belong in the chain of command." Marcus walked out of that room with 40 pairs of eyes on his back and laughter ringing in his ears. But as he stepped into the rain, one thought kept circling his mind. 400 to 500 dead. That was what the generals were willing to accept. 400 to 500 people who would wake up that morning thinking maybe finally someone was coming to save them. And then they would die anyway, caught in the crossfire, while American soldiers fought German soldiers over their heads. There had to be another way. Marcus looked down at his hands. Hands that had tracked elk through snowstorms. Hands that had once lived 3 days in Glacier National Park when he was 16, lost and alone, watching how the animals moved to stay hidden. Bears, he thought. Bears walk right through the world, and people do not even see them coming. The idea was forming. Crazy. Impossible. The kind of thing that would get him court-martialed just for suggesting it. But that night, Marcus could not sleep. He kept seeing those skeletal faces in the photographs, kept hearing the number. 400 to 500 dead. At 2 in the morning, he got up. The intelligence tent sat at the edge of the base, guarded by a single private who was more interested in his cigarette than his duty. Marcus waited until the guard turned away, then slipped under the back canvas. Inside, maps covered every surface. Reconnaissance photos. Guard rotation schedules. Marcus found the file marked Steinwald and spread it across a table using his flashlight to study the details. Camp Steinwald sat in a valley. Forest on 3 sides, dense alpine pine that came right up to the fence line. The 4th side opened to a service road where supply trucks came twice weekly. Marcus traced the fence line with his finger. 8 feet of barbed wire. 4 guard towers, 1 at each corner. Searchlights that swept the perimeter every 30 seconds. But there, right there on the southwestern corner, the intelligence photo showed something. The fence did not quite reach the ground. Maybe a drainage issue, water erosion during the spring thaw. Just a gap. 9, maybe 10 inches. Now you have to understand something about 1943. The Germans had been running these camps for years by this point. They had perfected the system. High fences, trained guards' dogs that could track a man for miles. Every camp was designed to be escape-proof. Prisoners went in, and the only way out was in a cattle car headed further east or in a body bag. The idea that someone could break into a camp that was not even considered possible. Marcus photographed the map with a hand-cranked camera from the supply office. His hands shook so badly the first 3 shots came out blurred. Interesting reading material. Marcus spun around, dropping the camera. His heart slammed against his ribs. A woman stood in the tent entrance. Not young, maybe 26, 27. Lieutenant's bars on her collar. Brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She had the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped pretending to smile about it. "Lieutenant Sullivan," she said, not like an introduction, like a statement of fact. "Rebecca Sullivan. And you are the supply clerk who thinks he is smarter than General Hartwick." Marcus's mouth went dry. "Ma'am, I can explain." Can you? Rebecca stepped inside, letting the tent flap fall closed behind her. Because from where I am standing, you just broke into a classified intelligence tent, photographed restricted materials, and are currently about 30 seconds away from spending the rest of the war in a military prison. Please, Marcus said, I just need to show me. Marcus blinked. What? The map. Rebecca moved to the table. Show me what you found. Marcus spread the reconnaissance photo across the table. Here, southwest corner. The fence has a gap. If someone could get through the forest without the guards seeing, they could dig under. Rebecca studied the image for a long moment. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a different photograph. She laid it beside Marcus's. Taken 3 weeks ago, she said. Different angle. See that? Marcus looked closer. The gap was bigger in this photo. Maybe 11 inches. Water erosion, Rebecca explained. It is getting worse. By February, it might be big enough for a person to squeeze through. How do you know about this? Rebecca's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Because I have been studying this camp for 6 months. Because General Hartwick will not listen to women who question his plans. Because I got demoted from captain to lieutenant last year for insubordination after I pointed out that his assault strategy for Monte Cassino had a fatal flaw. 300 men died, proving I was right. She leaned against the table. So yes, Private Reeves, I have been looking for another way into Camp Steinwald, and I have been hitting the same wall you are about to hit. Even if you get inside, even if you unlock every door, how do you get 800 people out without anyone noticing? Marcus took a breath. This was it. The moment where he either said the crazy thing out loud or walked away and let 400 people die. What if he started, stopped, tried again? What if I did not go in as a soldier, then what? Rebecca asked. A prisoner, a guard, a bear. The words hung in the air between them. Rebecca stared at him. For 5 full seconds, she did not move, did not blink. Then she started laughing, not mocking laughter like the officers. This was different. This was the kind of laugh that comes from pure shocked disbelief. A bear, she repeated. You want to dress up as a bear and walk into a Nazi prison camp? Guards see bears in that forest all the time, Marcus said quickly. The intelligence reports mention it. They scare them off, but they do not shoot unless the bear gets aggressive. To a guard, a bear is just a bear, something they see every week. Not dangerous, not interesting, just an animal looking for food. Rebecca wiped her eyes, but she had stopped laughing. Keep talking. I grew up in Montana. I have tracked grizzlies since I was 8 years old. I know how they move, how they behave. If I can make a good enough costume, if I can move like they do. Marcus pointed to the gap in the fence. I go in at 2 in the morning during the guard shift change. Crawl under here. Unlock the barracks. I can make skeleton keys if I can get impressions of the locks. Lead everyone out into the forest before the dawn roll call. That is insane. The alternative is 400 dead prisoners. Rebecca pulled out a cigarette, lit it with shaking hands. You want to know why I have really been studying this camp? My brother is in there. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Lieutenant David Sullivan. Rebecca continued, voice flat. Captured during a reconnaissance mission last year. The Army declared him KIA, but I got word through the Red Cross. He is alive. He is in Steinwald. And in 45 days, General Hartwick's assault plan is going to get him killed along with everyone else. She took a long drag, blew out smoke. So yes, Private Reeves, your idea is insane. It is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. But I have been sitting on this intelligence for 6 months trying to find a better plan, and I have got nothing. If you are serious about this, if you are actually willing to put on a bear costume and crawl through a Nazi prison camp, she met his eyes, then I will help you. But if we do this, we are both risking court-martial. We are both betting our lives that you can pull off the most ridiculous rescue mission in military history. Marcus thought about his father watching that black bear ghost through their campsite. He thought about the photographs of skeletal faces. He thought about Lieutenant David Sullivan somewhere in an Austrian valley, counting down his last 45 days. How long do we have? Marcus asked. Rebecca checked her watch. 43 days until execution, which means 42 days to build a bear costume good enough to fool trained German soldiers. Marcus held out his hand. Rebecca shook it. They had no idea that in just 30 days their timeline would be cut in half. They had no idea that Camp Steinwald's execution date was about to move up. And they definitely had no idea that someone else was already watching their plans unfold, someone who could either make this mission possible or destroy them both. Building a bear costume in a military camp without anyone asking questions turned out to be the easy part. The hard part was building one good enough to survive close inspection by guards who had been seeing real bears every week for 2 years. Marcus started with the basics. He needed hide, plenty of it. Rebecca worked her connections, traded 2 cartons of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey to a local Austrian hunter who operated on the black market. The man showed up 3 days later with 2 full bear skins, both black, both killed that winter. Schwarzbär, the hunter, said his breath fogging in the cold. Black bear, very common here, very stupid animals. They walk right up to houses looking for food. Perfect. Marcus spent his nights in the supply shed, doors locked, windows covered. He had requested transfer to night inventory duty, a job so boring that no one questioned why he wanted it. It gave him 8 hours alone with needle thread and 80 pounds of bear hide that smelled like death and wet fur. The first thing he learned was that his father's lessons from Montana had only covered part of the equation. Watching bears and becoming one were 2 different skills entirely. He cut the hide carefully using a straight razor he had sharpened until it could split paper. The body had to fit over his frame. Marcus was 5'11", 180 pounds. The average European black bear stood 6 feet on its hind legs, weighed 250 pounds. Close enough if he padded the costume right. He used his own jacket and 2 blankets to bulk out the body, sewing them into the hide's interior. The result was lumpy, awkward. He tried it on in front of the supply shed's cracked mirror. He looked like a man wearing a dead bear. Not good enough. Rebecca showed up on the 3rd night with a book, Field Guide to European Wildlife, she said, dropping it on the workbench. Borrowed from the base library. Study the anatomy. You need to know how real bears distribute their weight, how their shoulders move. Marcus spent the next week rebuilding. He adjusted the shoulder padding, redistributed the bulk toward the front legs and haunches. Real bears were heavier in the front. He added bulk to make the costume sag forward naturally when he walked on all 4s. The head was its own nightmare. He carved a wooden frame from pine branches he harvested during a supply run into the Austrian countryside. The skull had to be proportional, 14 inches from snout to back, 8 inches wide at the cheekbones. He covered the frame with hide, stretching it tight, tacking it down with carpet nails he had requisitioned from the supply office. The eyes were the breakthrough. Rebecca found a taxidermist in the nearby town of Salzburg. Old man named Herr Klein, half blind but still practicing his craft. Marcus showed up at his shop wearing civilian clothes, carrying a story about wanting to make a gift for his father back in Montana who loved hunting. Herr Klein sold him 2 glass bear eyes for $3 American. As Marcus left, the old man called after him in broken English. You making whole bear, not just head, whole bear, Marcus confirmed. Herr Klein nodded slowly. You are very ambitious, or very crazy. Maybe both, Marcus admitted. Back at the base, he installed the glass eyes into the wooden skull. They caught the light perfectly. Too perfectly. Real bear eyes were duller, more recessed. He rubbed the glass with fine grit sandpaper until they looked weathered, less bright. When Marcus was 12 years old, his father had taken him tracking a grizzly that had been raiding their neighbor's livestock. They had followed it for 2 days through Glacier National Park, sleeping rough, eating jerky, and drinking from mountain streams. On the 2nd night, they had made camp near a creek. His father was cooking beans over a fire when Marcus saw it. The grizzly standing at the edge of their camp just watching them. Not threatening, just observing. Don't move, his father had whispered. Don't even breathe. They had sat frozen for 10 minutes while the bear sniffed the air, swayed its head back and forth, decided they were not interesting, and ghosted back into the pines without making a sound. Later, his father had explained, bears own the forest. They move through it like they are part of the trees themselves. They do not sneak exactly. They just exist without disturbing anything. That is the difference between hiding and belonging. Marcus had never forgotten that lesson. And now, 28 years old, building a bear costume in an army supply shed in Austria, he finally understood what his father had meant. The costume had to look real. But more than that, he had to belong in that forest. Had to move like he was part of it. The final costume weighed 34 pounds. Heavy but manageable. Marcus tested it on January 28th, 2 weeks into the 43-day countdown. He waited until 11 at night, then walked into the forest behind the base wearing the full rig. The costume was hot, despite the winter cold. Sweat ran down his back within 5 minutes. The wooden head restricted his peripheral vision. The paws made his hands clumsy. But when he stopped moving, when he dropped to all fours and just existed in the forest, he became invisible. A patrol walked past him 40 feet away. Two soldiers' rifles slung cigarettes glowing in the dark. They were talking about home, about girls, about anything except their duty. They passed within 20 feet of Marcus and never even glanced his direction. Because all they saw, if they saw anything, was a dark shape in the trees. A shadow. Maybe a log. Maybe nothing at all. The costume worked in theory. But there was still one critical test Marcus had to pass, one that would either prove his plan could work or expose him as a fool who had just wasted 2 weeks building an elaborate failure. February 2nd, 23 days until execution. Rebecca had arranged something that made Marcus's stomach turn, a real test. Not sneaking past American soldiers on their own base, but walking within sight of actual German guards. There is a checkpoint, Rebecca explained, unfolding a map in the supply shed. 3 miles east, mixed Italian partisans and German observers. They monitor the road to Salzburg. If you can walk past them, get close enough that they see you clearly and they do not shoot. Then the plan might actually work, Marcus finished. Or you will be dead, Rebecca said flatly. German standing orders are to shoot bears that approach military installations. You get too close, they will kill you just to be safe. Marcus looked at the bear costume hanging on the wall. In the lamplight, it looked more real than he remembered. The glass eyes caught the flame, reflected it back. Almost alive. When he asked, "Tonight, new moon, you will have maybe 90 seconds of good visibility when you cross the service road. That is their view window. And if they shoot," Rebecca pulled out a flask, took a drink, offered it to Marcus. He shook his head. "If they shoot," she said, "I am 300 yards away with a rifle. I will return fire, extract you if possible. But Reeves, if they shoot, the mission is over. We cannot risk you dying. There is nobody else crazy enough to try this." Marcus put on the costume at midnight. Full rig this time. Paws with the wire claws that left realistic tracks, head with the glass eyes, the whole 34-pound setup. Rebecca drove him to the drop point in a supply truck, lights off, navigating by moonlight. She stopped a quarter-mile from the checkpoint. "Remember," she said as Marcus climbed out, "real bears are curious but cautious. They investigate, but they do not commit. If anything feels wrong, they leave. You need to sell that behavior." Marcus nodded. The bearhead made it difficult to speak clearly. Rebecca handed him something, a compass. Small brass with a cracked face. "My father carried this through the First War. Brought him home from the Argonne forest. It works, just in case you need to find your way back." Marcus tucked it into a pouch inside the costume right against his chest. Then he walked into the forest. The checkpoint came into view 15 minutes later. A small wooden building with a red and white barrier across the road. 2 guards visible, one Italian, one German. They were smoking, talking, not particularly alert. Marcus approached from the tree line, moving slowly. "Stop. Sniff the air. Sway the head. Take 3 steps. Stop again." He was 60 feet from the barrier when the Italian guard noticed him. The man stiffened, said something sharp. The German guard turned, saw Marcus. Time slowed down. The German raised his rifle, not aiming, just bringing it to ready position. He called out something in German. A question maybe, or a warning. Marcus froze completely. Real bears froze when surprised. They assessed the situation before deciding to run or fight. The German guard stepped forward, rifle now definitely pointed at Marcus. He shouted again, louder. Marcus made a low huffing sound, the noise a black bear makes when it is nervous. Then he swayed backward, turned and shuffled into the trees. Not running, not panicking, just leaving. He heard the guards talking behind him. One of them laughed. Then the sound of the barrier being lowered. They were going back to their posts. Marcus kept walking until he was a quarter-mile into the forest. Then he collapsed against a tree, ripped off the bear head, and threw up into the snow. His hands would not stop shaking. Rebecca found him 20 minutes later. She did not say anything, just handed him a canteen of water. "They saw me." Marcus finally managed. "Point blank, 60 feet. And they let you walk away, Rebecca said. They saw a bear. Just a bear. Marcus looked at the costume head lying in the snow. The glass eyes stared up at nothing. It works, he whispered. Jesus Christ, it actually works. They were almost back to the truck when Rebecca's radio crackled. She answered it, listened, and her face went pale. What Marcus asked. Intelligence update, Rebecca said quietly. Camp Steinwald. The execution date moved up. How far up? February 23rd. Marcus did the math. That is 21 days. We had 43. We have 21 now. Rebecca cut in. Something changed. Maybe they are evacuating the camp. Maybe new orders from Berlin. It does not matter. We are out of time. She looked at Marcus. Can you do this in 3 weeks? Marcus thought about the costume, about the test that had just worked, about 800 people who now had even less time. I do not have a choice, he said. Neither do they. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation, testing, and growing desperation. Rebecca secured updated reconnaissance photos. She bribed an Austrian informant, a woman who supplied vegetables to Camp Steinwald for intelligence on guard rotations, daily schedules, weak points in the security. The informant reported execution scheduled for 9 in the morning on February 23rd, mass shooting in the forest behind the camp. Graves already dug. Marcus practiced walking, moving, behaving like a bear until the movements became automatic. He spent hours in the forest watching real bears when he could find them, studying their body language through binoculars. Rebecca found clay and thin metal wire. Marcus made impressions of standard Wehrmacht padlocks from equipment the Army had captured at Monte Cassino. He filed down the wire by hand, testing each key against the locks until they opened smoothly. 6 keys, one for each barracks at Steinwald. He sewed a small leather pouch inside the costume right against his chest to carry them. February 17th, 6 days until execution. Marcus tested the complete mission profile. Full costume, full gear, 2-mile approach through forest terrain at night. He timed himself, 3 hours from drop point to theoretical camp perimeter. Too slow. He did it again. 2 hours, 40 minutes. Still too slow. On the third attempt, February 19th, he managed 2 hours, 15 minutes. Good enough. Barely. Rebecca met him at the supply shed that night. She looked exhausted. I need to tell you something. What is wrong? My commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Brennan, he has been asking questions. Where I disappear to at night. Why I am requisitioning civilian clothes and camping equipment. Why I have been accessing intelligence files above my clearance. Marcus's stomach dropped. Does he know I do not think so? Not yet. But if he starts digging, they both knew what that meant. Court-martial. Prison. The end of the mission before it even started. What do we do? Marcus asked. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then I am going to tell him. What? Not everything. But enough. She met his eyes. Brennan is not like Hartwick. He actually cares about his soldiers. If I can convince him this mission has a chance, even a small one, he might look the other way. And if he does not, then I spend the war in Leavenworth and you try this alone. February 20th, 3 days until execution day. Rebecca knocked on Lieutenant Colonel Brennan's office door at 0600 hours. Brennan was a thick-shouldered man in his 50s with gray at his temples and a scar across his jaw from the First War. He had been a sergeant, then crawled through the Argonne Forest while the French and Germans tried to kill each other over mud and barbed wire. Lieutenant Sullivan, he said, not looking up from his paperwork. This is early even for you. Sir, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Brennan finally looked up. Is this about Private Reeves and whatever the hell you two have been building in the supply shed? Rebecca's heart stopped. Sir, I have known for 2 weeks, Sullivan. Brennan leaned back in his chair. You think I do not notice when supplies go missing? When one of my lieutenants starts sneaking around like she is running her own private intelligence operation? I was not an officer 20 years ago. I was an enlisted man. I know what soldiers look like when they are planning something stupid. He opened a drawer, pulled out a file. Inside were the requisition forms Rebecca had signed. The civilian clothes, the camping equipment, the map requests. So Brennan said, are you going to tell me what this is about? Or am I going to have to arrest you for insubordination? Rebecca took a breath. Then she told him everything. The bear costume, the plan to infiltrate Steinwald, her brother in the camp, Marcus's background and training. The execution date 3 days away. The 800 prisoners who would die if nobody tried something different. Brennan listened without interrupting. His expression never changed. When Rebecca finished, the silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then Brennan stood up. He walked to his window, looked out at the rain-soaked base. "This is the most insane thing I have heard in 25 years of military service," he said finally. "Yes, sir. If this goes wrong, it will be a disaster. Public embarrassment for the Army. A private and a lieutenant running a rogue operation. Both of you will face court-martial. I will probably lose my command just for knowing about it." "Yes, sir." Brennan turned around. "When I was a sergeant in the Argonne, we had this problem. German machine gun nest that had us pinned down for 3 days. Killed anyone who tried to cross the field. Command kept sending men over the top, one platoon after another. All dead." He walked back to his desk. "Then this kid could not have been more than 18. He came up with an idea. Said we should go under, not over. Dig a tunnel." Command laughed at him. "Said tunneling would take weeks. The kid did it in 4 days, just him and 5 other guys. They came up right under the machine gun nest. Wiped it out with grenades before the Germans knew they were there." Brennan sat down. "That kid saved 100 lives with a stupid idea that nobody thought would work. His name was Marcus too. Different war, same kind of crazy." He pulled out a piece of paper, wrote something on it, signed it. "I am assigning you to night reconnaissance for the next 72 hours, Lieutenant. What you do during that reconnaissance is your own business. As for Private Reeves," he slid the paper across the desk. "I never saw him. I never heard about any bear costume. And if anyone asks, I have no idea what you are talking about." Rebecca picked up the paper. It was a blanket authorization for field exercises and equipment testing. "One more thing," Brennan said. "Your brother, David, I served with him before he was captured. He was a good soldier. Bring him home." Rebecca saluted, but her eyes were wet, and Sullivan Brennan added as she reached the door, "I want Reeves to succeed. But if this goes south, if they catch him, if this turns into an international incident, I will deny everything. You will both go down alone. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Then get the hell out of my office. You have got 72 hours. Rebecca found Marcus in the supply shed an hour later. She was shaking, but not from fear. "We are clear," she said. "Brennan knows. He is giving us a window." Marcus sat down hard on a wooden crate. "He is not stopping us. He is looking the other way." "Which means—" She smiled, and it was the first real smile Marcus had seen from her in weeks. "The mission is go. 72 hours until you walk into Camp Steinwald." But there was one thing neither Marcus nor Rebecca knew. One piece of intelligence they did not have. The Germans had changed something at Camp Steinwald in the last week, something that would either save the mission or doom 800 people to die in Marcus's arms before he could get them out. February 23rd, 1943, 12:30 in the morning. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating falling snow that looked like static against the black. Rebecca drove with her jaw, clenched hands tight on the steering wheel. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, already wearing most of the bear costume. The body was on. The paws were secured. The head sat on his lap like a sleeping thing. Neither of them had spoken for the last 20 minutes. "Drop point in 3 miles, Rebecca finally said. Her voice was flat professional, the voice of a soldier doing her job, but Marcus could hear the fear underneath. He checked his equipment one more time, the keys in the leather pouch pressed against his chest. The compass Rebecca's father had carried through the Argonne, a small knife just in case. "Remember the extraction point," Rebecca said. 2 miles northwest of the camp, logging road. I will have the trucks waiting from 4 in the morning onward. I remember. And if something goes wrong, then I improvise. Marcus looked at her. Rebecca, I am coming back, with all 801 of them. You cannot promise that. No, Marcus admitted, but I am going to try like hell. Rebecca pulled the truck off the main road onto a smaller trail, barely more than tire tracks in the snow. She drove another half-mile, then stopped. This is it, she said. 3 miles to Camp Steinwald. You should reach the perimeter by 2 in the morning. Guard shift change is at 2:15. That is your window. Marcus picked up the bear head. Through the small gap he had carved for visibility, he could see Rebecca's face. She looked young in the dashboard light. scared. "My brother," she said, "David. He is in Barrack 4. You will know him because he has a scar across his left eyebrow from a football game when we were kids." "I will find him," Marcus said. And Reeves' Rebecca's voice cracked. "If you do not make it back, if this goes wrong, I want you to know that what you are doing, I am making it back." Marcus pulled on the bear head. The world narrowed to a small tunnel of vision. He could hear his own breathing echo inside the wooden skull. He opened the truck door, stepped out into the snow. The temperature was -15 Celsius. His breath immediately fogged the interior of the bear head. He had prepared for this drilled ventilation holes near the mouth, but the cold still bit at his exposed skin around his wrists and neck. Rebecca leaned out the window. "See you at dawn," she said. Marcus wanted to say something meaningful, something that would matter if these were the last words he ever spoke to another American soldier. Instead, he just said, "Have the coffee ready." Then he turned and walked into the Austrian forest. The forest at night in February is a different world. The snow muffles sound until you can hear your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the creak of ice on tree branches. The darkness is not complete. Snow reflects whatever moonlight filters through the clouds, creating a twilight that never quite resolves into day or night. Marcus moved through this world carefully, step by step. The bear costume was heavy, the paws awkward. But he had practiced this exact movement pattern for 3 weeks. Drop to all fours. Move the right front paw forward. Then the left hind paw. Then left front, right hind. The rolling gait of a black bear moving through familiar territory. Every 30 seconds he stopped, sniffed the air, swayed his head, listened. Real bears moved with patience. They investigated the world slowly without urgency. Marcus had to do the same, even though every instinct screamed at him to run, to rush to get to those 800 prisoners before the execution squads woke up. But if he moved like a frightened human, the guards would see a frightened human. He had to move like a bear who owned this forest, like he belonged here. Marcus reached the forest edge at 1:47 in the morning. Through the trees, he could see Camp Steinwald laid out below him. Exactly like the reconnaissance photos, but somehow more terrible in person. 4 guard towers at each corner, searchlights sweeping back and forth like the eyes of giants. The barbed wire fence caught the light, gleamed like silver knives. 6 long, low wooden barracks sat inside the perimeter, dark except for a single window in each that showed pale lamplight. 800 people in those buildings, sleeping, maybe praying, maybe just waiting for morning and the bullets they knew were coming. Marcus checked the time on Rebecca's compass, 1:53 in the morning. The guard towers were 20 feet high. He could see the silhouettes of soldiers moving inside 2 per tower, wrapped in heavy coats against the cold. They looked old, bored, tired. Men who wanted their shift to end so they could go back to the barracks and sleep. That was the key to the whole plan. Boredom, routine. Guards who had been watching this same forest for 2 years had seen bears dozens of times. They had chased them off, maybe taken pot shots to scare them away. But bears were normal, expected, not dangerous unless cornered. Marcus took a deep breath inside the bear head. The air smelled like his own sweat and the musty bear hide. Then he walked out of the tree line into the clearing. The searchlight hit him at 55 feet. Marcus froze, completely still. The light pinned him against the snow like an insect on a card. He heard shouting from Tower 3. German words he did not understand. The tone was alarmed but not quite panicked. Bear, 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 bear. More voices joined in. The searchlight did not move from Marcus, just held him there, brilliant white against black forest. Through the narrow eye holes of the bear head, Marcus could see the silhouette of a guard raising a rifle. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. This is it, he thought. This is where I die. The rifle shot cracked across the valley. The bullet did not hit Marcus. It hit the ground 20 feet to his left, kicking up snow. A warning shot. The guards were not trying to kill him. They were trying to scare him away. Marcus's training took over. He had practiced this exact scenario. He dropped to all fours, made a low huffing sound, the noise a startled black bear makes, and shuffled backward toward the trees. Not running, not panicking, just leaving. More shouting from the towers. One of the guards threw something, a rock maybe, or a piece of metal. It landed in the snow near Marcus. Marcus grunted again louder. Then he turned and lumbered back into the forest, moving just slightly faster than he had approached. He heard the guards laughing. One of them called out something in German. The tone was mocking, dismissive. "Go away, stupid bear. Find someone else's garbage to eat." The searchlight moved on, sweeping back to its normal patrol pattern. Marcus kept walking until he was 200 yards into the forest hidden by the pines. Then he collapsed against a tree, ripped the bear head off, and gasped for air. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold the compass. They had seen him, point blank, 55 feet away, lit up like a Christmas tree. And they had seen a bear, just a bear. Marcus put the bear head back on. He gave himself 2 minutes to let his heart rate settle. Then he started moving again, circling around to the southwestern corner of the camp, where the fence gap should be. The hard part was just beginning. Now, at this point in the story, I need to explain something about German prison camps in 1943. These facilities were not just guarded, they were designed by engineers who had spent years perfecting the art of keeping people locked up. Every weak point was reinforced. Every potential escape route was monitored. Guard rotations were randomized to prevent pattern exploitation. The camps operated on a principle of absolute control. What the engineers had not considered was someone breaking in from the outside. Why would they? Nobody breaks into a prison camp. It violated every logical assumption about how these facilities worked. That was what made Marcus's plan so ridiculous. And that was exactly why it had a chance of succeeding. Marcus reached the southwestern corner of the fence at 2:11 in the morning. The gap was there exactly where the reconnaissance photos had shown it. Maybe 11 inches of space between the bottom of the barbed wire and the frozen ground. But 11 inches was not enough. Not for a man wearing a 34-pound bear costume. Marcus looked around. The nearest guard tower was 80 yards away, and its searchlight pointed toward the main gate. The next tower was 100 yards in the other direction. This corner sat in relative shadow. The Germans had not bothered lighting it as heavily because it backed up directly against dense forest. Nothing could approach from that angle without making noise, except a bear. Bears belonged in forests. Marcus pulled off the bear head and paws. He needed his hands free for this part. He used the wire claws on the gloves to dig. The ground was frozen solid. It took 12 minutes just to enlarge the gap from 11 inches to 14 inches. His fingers went numb despite the work. Sweat froze on his face. At 2:23 in the morning, he heard a sound that made his blood go cold. Footsteps, boots crunching on snow. A patrol. Marcus pressed himself flat against the fence, trying to become invisible. He could not reach the bear head. It was 3 feet away, too far to grab without moving. The patrol appeared around the corner of Barrack 6, 2 guards' rifles slung walking their circuit. They were talking, breath fogging the air. One of them laughed at something the other said. They walked within 40 feet of Marcus. He did not breathe, did not move. The fence pressed against his back. If they looked directly at him, if they shined a flashlight this direction. One of the guards stopped, said something to his companion, pointed toward the forest. Marcus closed his eyes. This is it. They saw me. It is over. But the guard was not pointing at him. He was pointing into the trees behind Marcus where something had moved. A real animal, maybe a deer. The second guard said something dismissive. They both laughed. Then they continued their patrol, walking away toward the main gate. Marcus waited until they were completely out of sight. Then he grabbed the bear head, pulled it back on, and squeezed himself under the fence. The barbed wire caught on the costume, scraped across his back, even through the thick hide. He felt something tear the costume or his skin, he could not tell. But he pushed through, dug with his hands, pulled himself forward inch by inch. At 2:34 in the morning, Marcus Reeves stood up inside Camp Steinwald. No explosions, no gunfire, no alarms. Just one man in a bear costume standing in the middle of a Nazi prison camp with 800 lives depending on whether he could open 6 padlocks without making a sound. Barrack 1 was 40 feet away. Marcus crawled toward it, staying low, moving like a bear investigating a new area. The searchlights swept overhead every 30 seconds. He timed his movement between passes. He reached the door at 2:39 in the morning. The padlock was standard Wehrmacht issue, the same kind he had practiced on for 3 weeks. Marcus pulled off the bear paws, reached into the leather pouch against his chest, and pulled out the first key. His hands were shaking. He tried to insert the key, missed the keyhole. Tried again. It slid in. He turned it. Nothing. The key did not work. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. No, 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 no. It has to work. I tested these 100 times. He pulled out the second key. Tried it. Nothing. Third key. The lock clicked. The shackle popped open. Marcus almost sobbed with relief. He swung the door open slowly. It creaked. He froze, but no guards came running. Inside, the smell hit him like a physical force. Human waste. Disease. Death. 140 people crammed into a space meant for maybe 50. They were sleeping on wooden platforms stacked 3 high, pressed together for warmth. Marcus stepped inside. In the dim light filtering through the single window, he could see skeletal faces, sunken eyes, bodies that were barely more than skin and bone. A woman on the nearest platform opened her eyes. She saw a bear standing in the doorway. She screamed. The scream cut through the night like a siren. People woke up confused, terrified. More screaming. Someone fell off a platform, crashed to the floor. Marcus ripped the bear head off. "Stop," he whisper shouted. "I am American. I am here to help." But nobody understood English. The screaming continued. People were scrambling backward, pressing themselves against the far wall. This was it. This was where the mission fell apart. In 30 seconds, the guards would hear the noise. They would come running. Marcus would be captured or killed, and 800 people would die at dawn, just like they were supposed to. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Quiet. A young voice, strong, speaking German. "Be quiet." The screaming stopped. A boy stepped forward. Maybe 14 years old, thin as a stick, with enormous eyes and a face that looked too old for his age. He said something in German to the crowd. Then he turned to Marcus and spoke in accented but clear English. "I am Daniel. I speak English." "Who are you?" Marcus wanted to cry with relief. "I am Private Marcus Reeves, United States Army. I am here to get you out." Daniel translated. Whispers spread through the barrack. "They do not believe you," Daniel said. "They think you are a trick. The Germans have done tricks before." Marcus pulled out his dog tags, showed them to Daniel. "I am real, and we have maybe 2 hours before sunrise. 2 hours to get 800 people out of this camp before they shoot all of you." Daniel stared at the dog tags, then at Marcus, then at the bear costume lying on the floor. "You came here dressed as a bear, long story. Can you translate? Yes. Then tell them we are leaving. Right now. Follow me into the forest. Stay completely silent. If anyone makes noise, we all die." "Do they understand?" Daniel spoke rapidly in German. Heads nodded. "They understand," Daniel said. "But many are too weak to walk far." "Then the strong will carry the weak," Marcus said. "We do not leave anyone behind." He grabbed the bear head. "I have to unlock 5 more barracks. Stay here. Do not make any noise. I will be back in 10 minutes. "Wait," Daniel said. "There is a man in Barrack 4, an American. He has been here 8 months. His name is David Sullivan." Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. "I know. I am here for him too. For all of you." He pulled the bear head back on and stepped out into the cold. The next 15 minutes were the longest of Marcus's life. Barrack 2. Key worked on the second try. 130 people inside, all awake, all terrified. Daniel was there to translate. They understood. Barrack 3. Key worked on the first try. 140 people. An old man grabbed Marcus's hand, kissed it, started crying. Marcus pulled away gently. No time. Barrack 4. Key stuck in the lock. Marcus had to wiggle it, felt the wire bend. "Please do not break. Please do not break." The lock opened. Inside, Marcus found him. Lieutenant David Sullivan sat on the bottom platform watching the door. He was thin. Everyone was thin, but his eyes were alert. The scar across his left eyebrow was exactly where Rebecca had described. Marcus pulled off the bear head. "David Sullivan?" he asked. David stared at him. "Who is asking?" "Your sister sent me, Rebecca. She is waiting 3 miles from here with trucks. We are going home." David's face crumpled. He put his head in his hands and shook silently. Barrack 5, 135 people. Key worked. Barrack 6, 125 people. Last key, last lock. Click. Marcus stepped back outside at 2:54 in the morning. All 6 barracks unlocked. 800 people standing inside waiting, barely daring to breathe. The hard part was about to begin. Marcus put the bear head back on and walked to the center of the compound. This was the moment of maximum exposure. If any guard looked down from the towers right now, they would see a bear standing in the middle of camp surrounded by open barrack doors. But the guards were cold tired, counting down the minutes until their shift ended. They watched the perimeter, not the interior. Why would they? The prisoners were locked up. Nothing could happen until morning roll call. Marcus walked to the fence gap. People began filing out of the barracks, silent as smoke. They moved like ghosts. Some of them had to be carried. Some leaned on each other. But they moved. Daniel appeared at Marcus's side. "Many are too weak," he whispered. "They will not make it through the forest." "They will make it," Marcus said. "We will carry them if we have to." The first person reached the fence gap. An elderly man, maybe 70 years old. He looked at the 14-inch opening, looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded. The old man lay down in the snow and pulled himself through. It took almost 2 minutes. At this rate, Marcus thought, "We will be here for 3 hours." That was when he discovered what the Germans had changed. The fence post next to the gap was loose. Not broken, just loose. Weakened by the same water erosion that had created the gap. Marcus grabbed the post and pulled. It moved. He pulled harder. The post came free of the ground. With the post gone, the fence could be bent. Not much, maybe 18 inches instead of 14. But every inch mattered. Marcus turned to the strongest men in the group, made a pulling motion. They understood. 3 of them grabbed the fence, pulled it up. The gap doubled. Now 24 inches. People started going through faster. Still slow, still too slow, but faster. 30 seconds per person. 800 people. 24,000 seconds. 6 hours and 40 minutes. Dawn came in 3 hours and 15 minutes. They would never make it. At 3:17 in the morning, with 250 people through the fence and 550 still waiting, something went wrong. A dog barked. Not the guard dogs in the kennels. A stray. A German shepherd that had wandered into the camp, probably looking for food. It ran toward the group at the fence, barking, tail wagging. Just a friendly dog. Maybe it smelled the people. Maybe it was curious about the bear. But the noise carried across the compound. A searchlight swung toward them. Marcus had maybe 5 seconds before the light reached the fence. Before the guards saw 250 people standing in a line, crawling under a fence, escaping. Before everything fell apart, he did the only thing he could think of. He charged the dog. Not attacked, charged. Made a huffing sound, deep and threatening. The sound a bear makes when defending territory. The dog yelped, tucked its tail, ran away toward the guard towers. The searchlight followed the dog. Guards shouted. One of them fired a shot at the dog, missed. The dog disappeared into the darkness. The guards laughed, went back to their posts. The searchlight moved away from the fence. Marcus stood frozen for 10 seconds, hard hammering. That had been close. Too close, but they were still safe. Still undetected. Daniel touched his arm. "The dog saved us." "The dog almost killed us," Marcus corrected. "Same thing, maybe." By 4:11 in the morning, everyone was through the fence. 800 people standing in the Austrian forest, shaking with cold and fear and desperate hope. Marcus led them deeper into the pines, away from the searchlights, away from the guards who still thought everyone was sleeping peacefully in locked barracks. He took off the bear head. The cold air felt like freedom. David Sullivan was there, supporting a woman who could barely walk. He looked at Marcus. "We're 2 miles?" Marcus pointed northwest. "Logging road. My partner has trucks waiting." "Your partner? Your sister?" David's eyes went wide. "Rebecca is here. She planned half of this mission." Marcus started walking. "Come on, we need to be completely clear before 6 in the morning roll call." They moved through the forest like a river of silent ghosts. Some of them cried they could not help it, but they cried silently. Marcus led them, still wearing the bear costume body, the head tucked under his arm. He checked Rebecca's compass every 50 yards. Northwest. Always northwest. At 4:43 in the morning, they reached the logging road. Rebecca was there with 3 stolen military trucks, exactly as promised. She saw the mass of people emerging from the forest. Her hand went to her mouth. Then she saw David. She ran to him. They collided, holding each other. Both crying now. You came, David said. You actually came. Of course I came, Rebecca whispered. You are my brother. Marcus started loading people into the trucks. The sick, the elderly, the children first. The stronger ones would have to walk alongside. Daniel appeared at his side. What you did? I just opened some doors, Marcus said. No. Daniel shook his head. You gave us hope. When a bear walked into that barrack, I thought I was dying. I thought my mind was breaking. But then you took off the head and you were real. You were a man who came to save us when nobody else would. Marcus did not know what to say to that, so he just gripped the boy's shoulder. Get in the truck. By 5:03 in the morning, everyone was loaded. The truck started moving. Marcus sat in the lead truck's cab, still wearing the torn bear costume. Rebecca drove. They did not speak for the first 10 minutes. Then Rebecca said, You did it. We did it, Marcus corrected. 800 people, 0 casualties. Check your math. Marcus looked back at the people crammed into the truck bed. 801. I am counting myself. Rebecca laughed. It sounded like relief and exhaustion and joy all mixed together. They drove toward Allied lines as dawn broke over the Austrian Alps. Behind them in Camp Steinwald, the Germans were just beginning to discover that 6 barracks full of condemned prisoners had vanished in the night, and all they would find was a torn piece of bear hide caught on the fence and paw prints in the snow that led nowhere. 6 in the morning, February 23, 1943, Camp Steinwald. Hauptmann Wilhelm Kruger, camp commandant, stood in the center of the empty compound and tried to understand what he was seeing. 6 barracks, all unlocked, all empty. Not empty like prisoners had been taken away in trucks. Empty like they had simply vanished. He had been a soldier for 22 years. He had served in the last war, survived the trenches at Verdun. He had run 4 different camps since 1940. He knew how camps worked. He knew how security worked. Prisoners did not escape. Not from places like this. The fences were too high, the guards too alert, the dogs too well trained. And 800 prisoners definitely did not escape all at once without anyone noticing. But the evidence was undeniable. The barracks were empty. The prisoners were gone. Kruger walked to the southwestern fence line where one of his patrols had reported seeing tracks. He knelt in the snow examining them. Bear prints, large ones, fresh from last night. They led from the forest to the fence, then back into the forest again. He followed the tracks to where they disappeared into the trees. His deputy, Lieutenant Hoffman, came running up. Herr Hauptmann, we have searched the entire perimeter. No sign of forced entry, no explosive residue. The only anomaly is bear tracks, Kruger finished. I see them. Hoffman looked confused. Sir, bears do not open padlocks. Bears do not organize 800 people to crawl under a fence. Kruger stood up. He was a practical man. He did not believe in miracles or ghosts. But he also could not explain what had happened. Call it in, he said finally. Report to Berlin that 800 prisoners escaped during the night. Tell them we are still investigating the method. Should we report the bear tracks? Kruger looked at his deputy. If he reported bear tracks, Berlin would think he was insane. They would think he was making excuses. They might shoot him for incompetence. No, he said. Just report an escape. Do not mention the bear. But for the rest of his life, and Kruger would survive. The war would die of old age in 1987 in a quiet apartment in Munich. He would wonder about those tracks, about how 800 people had vanished from a maximum security camp without making a sound. Sometimes late at night, he would think maybe it was a bear. Maybe bears are smarter than we thought. But mostly he would think whoever planned that escape was either the bravest or the craziest person I never met. The trucks rolled into the American base in northern Italy at 9:47 in the morning. 800 prisoners. 1 torn bear costume, 2 soldiers who had just committed the most successful unsanctioned military operation in the history of the war. General Hartwick was waiting at the gate. His face was unreadable. He stood with his arms crossed, watching as truck after truck unloaded skeletal humans who had been scheduled to die that morning. Marcus climbed out of the lead truck still wearing the remains of the bear costume. The head was long gone abandoned in the forest, but the body was still intact, though torn and stained with snow and mud. He walked up to Hartwick and saluted. Hartwick looked at him for a long moment, then at the costume, then at the 800 survivors being helped down from the trucks by medics and chaplains. Private Reeves, Hartwick said. His voice was very quiet. Do you understand what you have done, yes, sir? You disobeyed direct orders. You conducted an unauthorized military operation. You stole military equipment, falsified reports, and enlisted Lieutenant Sullivan in a conspiracy that could have ended both your careers and endangered Allied intelligence operations. Yes, sir, you accomplished something I told you was impossible. You saved 800 lives that I had already written off as acceptable losses. You did it with zero casualties, zero gunfire, and one bear costume that looks like it came from a county fair. Marcus said nothing. Hartwick stepped closer. You made me look like a fool's son. Yes, sir. I apologize for... Hartwick held up a hand. I am not finished. You made me look like a fool because I was one. I was so busy planning the military solution, the proper solution, the one that followed regulations and doctrine, that I forgot the first rule of warfare. Sir, victory does not give a damn about how you achieve it. It only cares that you do. Hartwick looked at the survivors again. I would have gotten 400 of those people killed. You saved all 800. That makes your stupid idea better than my smart one. He saluted Marcus. Marcus, shocked, returned the salute. You are getting a silver star, Hartwick said. The ceremony will be classified because I am not explaining to Washington how a private in a bear costume succeeded where my assault plan failed. But you are getting the medal. You have earned it. He turned to go, then paused. And Reeves? Next time you have a crazy idea, tell me. I promise I will listen. I might even try not to laugh. But the real moment, the one that mattered most, came 3 hours later. Marcus was in the medical tent having a doctor treat the cuts and bruises from crawling under the fence. Rebecca was there too, sitting with David, who was being rehydrated and examined. Daniel appeared in the tent entrance. The 14-year-old boy who had translated, who had helped calm the panic when Marcus first opened the barrack door. Can I talk to you, Daniel asked Marcus. They stepped outside. The Italian sun was warm despite the winter. It felt like the first warm day Marcus had experienced in months. I wanted to say thank you, Daniel said, but also to ask a question. Go ahead. Why did you do it? You are a soldier. You could have followed orders. You could have let the generals make their plan. Why did you risk everything for 800 people you never met? Marcus thought about that. He thought about his father teaching him to track bears in Glacier National Park, about the photographs of skeletal faces in the briefing room, about the number 400 dead. Because someone had to, he said finally, and because I knew a different way. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it should have failed, but I could not live with myself if I did not at least try on. Daniel nodded slowly. I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help people who have no hope. Then you will be better than me, Marcus said, because I only did this once. If you make it your life, you will save thousands. Daniel kept that promise. He became Dr. Daniel Klein, a surgeon at Johns Hopkins. Over 40 years, he would perform over 15,000 surgeries, many of them for patients who could not afford treatment. He would say that every life he saved was paying forward the night a bear walked into a camp and reminded him that hope comes from the most unexpected places. The war ended in May 1945. Marcus Reeves received his Silver Star in a ceremony attended by exactly 3 people: General Hartwick, Rebecca Sullivan, and Lieutenant Colonel Brennan. The official report read for exceptional bravery in conducting a successful prisoner extraction under extreme conditions. It never mentioned Austria, never mentioned Camp Steinwald, never mentioned a bear costume. The mission was classified at the highest levels. The Army wanted it buried, not because it failed, but because it succeeded in a way that made their conventional tactics look obsolete. Marcus was quietly given an honorable discharge and sent home to Montana in September 1945. He bought a small cabin outside Glacier National Park, became a hunting guide, took tourists into the wilderness to see bears and elk and mountain lions. Sometimes they would ask if he had seen action in the war. He would say yes, but he would never elaborate. The bear costume went into a trunk in his attic. He never looked at it. Rebecca Sullivan became the first female colonel in Army intelligence in 1963. She taught at West Point for 15 years. Every class she would tell a story. She would never use Marcus's name, operational security, even decades later. But she would talk about the operator who taught her the most important lesson of her military career. The biggest mistake commanders make is assuming they know the only way to solve a problem, she would tell her cadets. Real innovation comes from people who are willing to look foolish, who are willing to try things that have never been tried, who ignore the experts saying it cannot be done. Many of her students became generals. They remembered the lesson. Some of them would apply similar thinking in Vietnam, in Desert Storm, in Afghanistan. Unconventional approaches that saved lives because someone was brave enough to look stupid. They called it the bear costume method in unofficial military circles, a technique for achieving objectives through misdirection and assumption exploitation. Marcus never knew his idea had become doctrine. David Sullivan went home to Colorado. He married his childhood sweetheart in 1947. They had 4 children. Every year on February 23rd, he would call Marcus. Sometimes they would talk for hours, sometimes just for a few minutes. David always ended the call the same way. "Thank you for my life." And Marcus always answered the same way. "You would have done the same thing." The survivors scattered across the world. America, Britain, Israel, Canada, Argentina, Australia. They built new lives, had children, grandchildren, and they told the story. Not all of them. Some survivors never spoke about the camps. The trauma was too deep. But many of them told their families about the night a bear walked into their barrack, about the American soldier who wore fur and crawled through snow, about 800 people following a man in a costume through an Austrian forest while German guards searched the wrong places. Some of their children thought it was a fever dream, a hallucination born from trauma and starvation. But others believed, because the details were too specific, the names too consistent. Camp Steinwald, February 23, 1943. Private Marcus Reeves, Lieutenant Rebecca Sullivan, the bear costume with glass eyes and wire claws. In 1976, a woman named Sarah Goldstein, one of the prisoners from Barrack 1, began organizing. She put ads in Jewish newspapers across the U.S. and Israel. Were you at Camp Steinwald? Do you remember February 23, 1943? I am looking for others who survived that night. 43 people responded. They pooled their money, hired a private investigator, tracked down Rebecca Sullivan, who had retired from the Army and was living in Virginia. Rebecca gave them Marcus's address. September 1978, 35 years after the rescue. Marcus was 63 years old, still living in his cabin, still taking tourists to see wildlife. He was splitting firewood one autumn morning when he heard cars coming up the dirt road. Not one car, 5 cars, a convoy. They parked in his yard and people started getting out. Elderly people, middle-aged people, children. Marcus put down his axe. He did not recognize any of them. Then a woman stepped forward. Late 60s, gray hair, eyes that had seen too much. "Do you remember me?" she asked. "Barrack 1. I was the woman who screamed when you came through the door." Marcus stared at her, and suddenly he did remember. The face was older, fuller, but the eyes were the same. "You are," he started. "Sarah," she said. "Sarah Goldstein. I was Sarah Hoffman then." More people came forward, introducing themselves. Faces Marcus half remembered from that dark February night. And then a young man, maybe 28 years old, stepped through the crowd. "I was 14, he said. "You probably do not remember me." "There were so many," Daniel Marcus said immediately. "You translated, you kept everyone calm." Daniel smiled. "Dr. Daniel Klein now. Johns Hopkins. I have 3 children. I wanted them to meet the man who gave me a future." 3 children stepped forward, 2 girls and a boy. The oldest could not have been more than 8. "We would not exist," Daniel said quietly, "if you had not walked into that camp." Marcus looked around at the 50-plus people standing in his yard. Survivors and their children and their grandchildren. He counted quickly. Over 100 people. Marcus's voice broke. "I just opened some doors." "You did more than that," Sarah said. "You reminded us that humanity exists even in the darkest places. That someone would risk everything for strangers. That hope can arrive wearing fur." She handed him a package. Inside was a photograph. All 43 surviving prisoners who had been at Camp Steinwald gathered together for this trip. They had flown from 8 different countries just to be here. "We wanted you to know," Sarah continued, "that we never forgot, that we told our children and our grandchildren, that they are here because you were brave enough to try something everyone said was impossible." Rebecca appeared from one of the cars. She was 61 now, retired but still straight-backed and sharp-eyed. "Brought you company," she said to Marcus. "I see that." Marcus was crying now, not hiding it. Rebecca put a hand on his shoulder. "You have got about 200 people who want to talk to you today. Think you can handle that?" Marcus looked at the crowd, at Daniel's children, at the elderly survivors holding hands with grandchildren who had only heard the story as a bedtime tale. "Yeah," he said, "I can handle that." They stayed until sunset, sharing stories, sharing meals. The survivors wanted to know everything. What Marcus's life had been like, what happened to the costume, whether he had ever gone back to Austria. Marcus told them about Montana, about his quiet life as a guide, about Rebecca's career and David's family, and Hartwick's eventual admission that the bear costume plan was brilliant. As the sun set over Glacier National Park, Daniel found Marcus sitting alone on the cabin porch. "What you are doing," Daniel said, gesturing to the wilderness, taking people into the forest to see bears. "It is fitting." "How do you mean you teach people to respect them, to understand them, to see that what looks dangerous can actually be salvation in disguise?" Marcus smiled. "My father taught me that when I was 8 years old. He said bears are ghosts who can move through the world without disturbing it." "He was right," Daniel said. "You proved it. Now I want to bring this forward to today, because this story is not just about World War II. It is about something bigger. In 1909, Marcus donated the bear costume to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. It took the museum 3 years to authenticate it. They interviewed survivors, examined the hide, verified the timeline. When they were satisfied it was real, they built a permanent exhibit. Unconventional Heroes. The Bear Costume Rescue of Camp Steinwald. The exhibit opened in 1982. Over the next 40 years, more than 3 million people would visit it. They would stand in front of a glass case containing a torn bear hide with glass eyes and wire claws, and they would read the story of a 28-year-old private who walked into a Nazi prison camp and walked out with 800 lives. Children laughed at how silly the costume looked. Adults cried reading what it had accomplished. Military academies began studying the mission in the 1990s. West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy. They analyzed the tactics, the psychology, the risk assessment, the execution. They called it assumption exploitation, identifying what your enemy expects to see and becoming that thing. Navy SEALs used similar techniques in the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound in 2011. They did not announce themselves. They moved quietly. They exploited assumptions. Nobody dressed as a bear. But the principle was the same. Business schools picked up the story in the 2000s. Harvard Business School created a case study, Innovation Under Constraint, the Marcus Reeves approach. It taught that conventional wisdom is often the enemy of breakthrough solutions, that sometimes you need someone who does not know the right way to solve a problem. Steve Jobs referenced the story in a 1997 interview. Sometimes the person who succeeds is the one who does not know what is impossible. But the real legacy was not in military doctrine or business cases. It was in the families. As of 2025, researchers estimate that approximately 12,000 people are alive today because Marcus Reeves put on a bear costume in February 1943. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. 12,000 lives that exist because one man decided 400 dead was unacceptable. Marcus Reeves died on November 17, 2003 at age 88. The funeral was held at a small church in Montana. The local paper estimated maybe 50 people would attend. Family, friends, a few hunting clients. Over 400 people came. 60 were original Camp Steinwald survivors, the ones who could still travel. 200 were their children and grandchildren. The rest were military officers, historians, and people who had simply heard the story and wanted to pay respects. Rebecca Sullivan, now 82, using a cane but still fierce, gave the eulogy. "Marcus Reeves never wanted to be called a hero," she said. "I know because I called him one in 1978 and he told me to stop. He said heroes are people who do impossible things. But he insisted what he did was not impossible. It was just different." She looked at the crowd. He was right. It was not impossible. It was just so simple that everyone else was too smart to think of it. That is the real lesson Marcus taught us. We spend our whole lives learning the right way to do things, the proper way, the way experts tell us is best. And then someone like Marcus comes along, someone who grew up tracking bears in Montana, someone who never went to military academy, someone who everyone told to shut up and follow orders. And they show us that sometimes being naive is the same as being brilliant. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to look foolish. Rebecca's voice broke. Marcus gave me back my brother. He gave 800 families back their loved ones. He gave the world 12,000 people who would not exist without him. That is not just heroism. That is a miracle wrapped in fur. Daniel Klein spoke next. He was 74 now, retired from surgery, but still volunteering at free clinics. I was 14 years old when a bear walked into my barrack, he said. I thought I was dying. I thought my mind was breaking. But then the bear took off its head, and inside was a man who said, I am American. I am here to save you. I have spent my life trying to be that bear, trying to show up in places where people have lost hope, trying to remind them that salvation arrives in unexpected forms. He held up a photograph. This is my family, 4 children, 9 grandchildren. We exist because Marcus Reeves was crazy enough to put on a costume and crawl through a Nazi prison camp. Every one of us, every survivor, every child, every grandchild, we are Marcus's legacy. We are the proof that one person with one ridiculous idea can change everything. The bear costume still sits in the Holocaust Museum. New generations of children visit every year. They press their faces against the glass. They giggle at the worn fur and clouded eyes. Their parents tell them the story. Some teachers have started using it as a lesson plan. What would you do if everyone told you your idea was stupid? What costume would you wear to save 800 people? In 2018, a group of middle school students in Maryland wrote letters to the surviving Camp Steinwald descendants. They wanted to know what hope looked like, what courage meant. Sarah Goldstein, now 98, the woman who had screamed when Marcus first opened Barrack 1, wrote back to every single student. Her letter ended, hope arrives in forms you do not expect. Sometimes it is a bear. Sometimes it is a kind word from a stranger. Sometimes it is the knowledge that somewhere in the world someone is brave enough to try the impossible. Never stop being that person. The question is not whether Marcus Reeves was a hero. Of course he was. The question is, what are you willing to wear? Not literally, of course. Most of us will never need to dress as a bear and infiltrate a prison camp. But all of us face moments where conventional wisdom says something is impossible, where experts tell us to follow the rules, where people laugh at our ideas and tell us to be realistic. Marcus Reeves faced that moment in January 1943. He could have listened to General Hartwick, could have accepted that 400 dead was acceptable losses. Instead, he built a bear costume. Today we face impossible problems: climate change, disease, poverty, division. Problems that seem too big, too complex, too entrenched to solve. The experts have their plans, the conventional approaches, the strategies that follow all the rules and sound very smart. And maybe those plans will work. But maybe what we really need is someone who grew up tracking bears in Montana. Someone who does not know the right way to solve the problem. Someone naive enough, brave enough to try the idea that makes everyone else laugh. Maybe what we need is you. Marcus Reeves is gone, but the question he left behind still waits for each of us. What impossible problem will you solve by being brave enough to look foolish? What lives will you save by trusting the idea everyone calls stupid? What costume will you wear? The camera lingers on the bear costume in its glass case. The fur is matted now. The glass eyes are clouded. The wire claws are bent and broken. But preserved alongside it is something else. A photograph of 43 elderly people standing together in Montana, September 1978. They are smiling, holding hands, alive. And below the photograph, a small brass plaque. Camp Steinwald, Austria. February 23, 1943. 800 prisoners scheduled for execution. 800 prisoners saved by one man with one ridiculous idea. Remember, hope arrives in unexpected forms. Sometimes salvation wears fur. If this story moved you, please share it. Tell someone about Marcus Reeves in the bear costume. Tell them about the 12,000 descendants who exist because one person refused to accept the impossible. And if you have ever tried something everyone said was crazy, If you have ever been brave enough to look foolish, leave a comment. Tell your story, because the world needs more people like Marcus. We need more people willing to wear the bear costume.